Pine Mountain is an ecological treasure in southeastern Kentucky that represents one of the last great contiguous stretches of unfragmented forest. While other parts of the region have been developed, strip mined, or heavily logged, it remains relatively untouched. Positioned at the western edge of the Appalachian Mountains, this mountain offers commanding views of Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, and Tennessee. If there ever was a hope of preserving an ecological legacy for future generations of Kentuckians, this is it. Breached by only 6 roads and 110 miles, this mountain represents a significant, unprotected wilderness area guarded by jutting sandstone cliffs, tangled rhododendron thickets, and large prehistoric landslides laden with car-sized boulders. This mountain and its 45 miles of trail were the setting for one of the most brutal backpacking trips I've ever endured. Accompanied by a beloved trail brother and a seasoned backpacking legend, we found ourselves caught in the wreckage of a recent ice storm that would leave us whipped, bloodied, and bruised before the end. This is our story of the through hike of the Pine Mountain State Scenic Trail. On February the 23rd, Nick and I drove after work 3 hours southeast to Elkhorn City, Kentucky, where we left my truck and then carpooled back an hour west along the mountain ridge to the trailhead above Whitesburg, Kentucky. With a near full moon above our heads to guide our paths, our journey didn't start until 10 p.m. that night en route to the Flamingo Shelter to meet up with Jason Wish, a multiple FKT holder, including the Sheltowee trace. This was our first trip together with him. Jason graciously stayed awake to greet us and keep a fire stoked to anoint the beginning of our trip. Although it was late, dark, and cool, the excitement in our conversation and the many miles that lay ahead was a source of warmth that stayed with me as I set up my bed in the Flamingo Shelter. I had been awake that day for almost 20 hours, so I was eager to let the cool mountain air lull me to sleep.
I mean, I've did this once before and I left it by my truck by itself there and it was fine, so maybe since it's off season, there won't be people out and about.
I almost thought about driving one of my older trucks. I got some decent trucks.
It probably burnt, smoldered for days.
So he, usually was cut close on water, but we're not that far from it, are we? I entered it in my notes on my iPhone.
There it is.
Ready to roll. I got the same idea you do.
After a serene morning at camp, we were ready to begin our first full day of mileage. Our original plan was to make it to the Jack Sauter campsite, approximately 14.5 miles from the Flamingo shelter, but due to the severity of the ice storm damage and some injuries later developed on trail, we were forced to stop short at Poplar Hollow, totaling 12.5 miles for the day. Our first notable feature to witness was Eagle Arch. I only saw it from a distance during my first hike of the PMT, so we all decided to descend down to experience it firsthand. It was raised to a knife's edge point along the top, and from the bottom its expansiveness was overwhelming.
Pretty cool.
The dark side of the mountain was still covered in remnants of that destructive ice that ripped out the tops of so many trees along its ridge. We almost needed crampons to navigate because of the slipperiness. As we began our ascent to High Rock, we met 2 employees of the nature preserve who were already hard at work clearing the trail for travelers such as us. We made sure to express our gratitude. The sunshine and warmth didn't feel like it belonged on this February day. It was the perfect backdrop for the vistas to come along the top of this sandstone ridgeline.
deep snow and ice on the shaded side of these mountains.
These overlooks made Nick and I feel like some sort of ambassadors for Kentucky's beauty to Jason. I felt proud to showcase these mountains we call home to him. The sense of vastness and wildness permeated everywhere. I stayed on High Rock for several moments after Nick and Jason departed, to stay in that moment for as long as I could. I felt like an astronaut sitting among some foreign, extraterrestrial rocks as we had lunch on Mars Rock. This first day was a tale of two mountains. Ice, snow, and blowdowns filled one side, while sunshine, openness, and warmth the other. This back and forth nature slowed our pace to a crawl at times.
Is there any? But you said there's nothing good. Like if we. God bless America. Oh man.
When we reached Adena Springs shelter, Nick was beginning to experience significant pain and discomfort in his knee from a previous injury, which caused us to reassess how much further we wanted to push with his health in mind. We set our sights for Indian Grave campsite, but were later unsuccessful due to lack of flat real estate and escaping sunlight. Nick and I found water several hundred feet down the ridge, while Jason scouted for potential campsites down the trail. We found what we needed at just the right time at Poplar Hollow.
Dead tree and an elk hanging apart.
I think it does. Shaking it some.
That's pretty pathetic. I don't know about this. I don't know if it's gonna go or not. I'll use that little thing. These little wax cotton ball things. They work great, but I will save that if I don't need it. So if this thing doesn't get going here in a second, we might need that as big.
Okay. It did go, and that fire was a warming salve to us as we retired, hopeful that our aches and pains would go away by the morning. Sometimes, though, the pain doesn't go away overnight. Unfortunately for Nick, his injury was still bothering him enough that he didn't feel it was safe or smart to continue onward for the next 32 miles. He decided to backtrack to his truck and then drive up to us at Birch Knob Shelter that night. I was heartbroken for him, but wanted to keep him with Jason and I in spirit through our efforts to battle through the remainder of this trail. Our second day was by far the most brutal. Jason and I finished the Highland section as we descended down the ridge into Pound Gap just outside Jenkins, Kentucky, and then immediately climbed back up the mountain to begin the Birch Knob section, which took us through some of the most affected areas from the ice storm, including a reroute between Tucker and Cable Gap that was almost impassable. We wound up traversing well over 20 miles for the day before we reached Birch Knob Observation Tower and its nearby shelter well after dark.
I'm thinking about filming it and then coming back.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna be going slower than you.
Come on, Sam, you didn't want to run across the top of the logs?
Dude, knowing me, I would have slipped. carry me out of here.
Oh, yeah, we don't want to do that. Made it.
Did.
That was a good one.
Oh, that might be some blooper reel right there. Going.
After getting some extra fuel at the nearby gas station, we began our trek towards Birch Knob. The climb out of Pound Gap was brutal, ascending some 400 feet in the first mile.
Indians to look out for.
Don't let these shots fool you. Around every beautiful nook and bend of the mountain was an explosion of destruction waiting for us to navigate through. I think I tried to get my mind off of the difficulty by seeking out to find the more aesthetically pleasing shots along the way. The reroute between Tucker and Cable Gaps feels like a fever dream now. I'm not sure if I've ever felt more overwhelmed by the power of Mother Nature to slow you down and disorient you than I did during that 2-mile stretch. To make matters worse, and unbeknownst to me at the time, during a particularly tense battle with some of those unforgiving rhododendrons, my video camera got ripped from my pouch, and I had to retrace my steps and relive the chaos again to try to find it. God was very gracious to my desperate pleas to find it, for the past several months' worth of footage was archived on its memory. We were so elated to get back on an established trail. I was supremely grateful to have Jason's company and friendship in the midst of such a challenge.
I always got to remind myself this is the kind of stuff that makes the backpacking trips fun. More relaxing. Doesn't have to always be about crushing miles. Even though that's what this is feeling like today.
I think another way Jason and I kept ourselves composed was through our conversations together. We talked about each other's lives, our convictions, our motivations behind a hobby as crazy as long-distance backpacking, and the stories of experiences and people we've had along the trail. Some of the most real and meaningful human connections have come through a backpacking trip, and this was no exception.
But we expect a fire when we arrive. Trail. Like a remnant. Choose your steps carefully.
We received some unfortunate news when we reached the road walk on Birch Knob Drive leading up to the observation tower. Nick made it to his truck, but was unable to access the road due to the gate being locked by the Forest Service.
What is that? Well, folks, I hit a snag. It is locked. Dang. Well, I guess the tower must be closed for the winter, so I'm a bust. Rats.
Even if it was unlocked, the amount of tree fall across the gravel path was so substantial his truck would have hit an impasse. We said our goodbyes to Nick on the phone and then pressed on to the tower, wishing he was bound in tow with us.
Off the ground. It's just sitting up there on the rocks, but this is part of the height you're talking about.
The 180 steps to the top were brutal after already walking 20 plus miles for the day, but the afterglow of the sunset with the sweeping mountain vistas was a fitting end to this painful day. Heck yeah.
You can see 6 different states from up here. Kentucky.
We hiked the last half mile in the dark from the tower to the shelter.
Man, you got a nice bright light. Alrighty. It's been a long time since I've looked this forward to being at a shelter.
When we finally reached it, we were filled with pure elation, for the day felt like it would never end. It was a welcome mountain home indeed. I felt like a wounded soldier licking my wounds as I hunkered down in that shelter.
Martin can't continue on and on and on like a snore, so I'll take that any day. I can take a little stink over a loud snore all night.
Inside, we found an old wool blanket to put over the doorway to keep the cold wind from entering. I don't think our bodies or spirits would have mended overnight as well as they did if not for that tiny oasis at the base of Birch Knob. I retired being very thankful for it. sir. Day 3 found us traversing approximately 13 miles from Birch Knob Shelter to the northern terminus at the bottom of the mountain near Elkhorn City, Kentucky. We would walk along the ridge and see even more impressive vistas, such as Skeet Rock Knob, Cumberland Knob, and Skeg Wall Overlook, before descending down to the Russell Fork near Breaks Interstate Park. With rain imminent, we hustled to get off the mountain as quickly as possible. Trees were splintered like bombshell victims all around us as we climbed over each blowdown and root wad.
Doesn't have satellite. We're gonna do a pull-away shot of us right here.
No, you're fine. The cold whipping wind was a humble reminder of the conditions that carved the sides of these mountains away to bare sandstone. The beauty was dreary and harsh and unforgiving. As we pass remnants of silica mining, there is no clear distinction between the trauma the forest canopy was displaying from human activity or Mother Nature herself.
Ouch! Razor. That's a razor cap.
What the heck?
Someone's dropping razors up here.
We had to come down off the main spine of the ridge one last time and back up again around Skeg Wall before our last push to the parking lot. It was the most steep climb of the entire trip, with grades feeling as harsh as 60% up at times. The payoff at the end, though, was breathtaking. Skeg Wall looms above the horizon like some distant Kentucky sandstone cousin of Yosemite's granite half dome in Northern California.
I think it's upside down, too.
Rainfall was a fitting companion to the descent, as our landscape evolved from bare, dry sandstone to a lush green mossy forest. My tank was completely empty. Hobbling, cold and soaked, we stepped onto the gravel lot, feeling like conquerors of a quest that no one else dared do during those days in February. The scars and bruises were worn with valor for many weeks afterward.
Whoa! Maybe I should go put my camera up and come back and do it again.